You're viewing Newcap News Year in Agriculture, a review of our big stories from 2015. Now, while there are many service clubs for youth, the 4-H Club taps into the hearts and minds of kids and develops a special bond for a chosen endeavor. We take a look at the role of the 4-H Club in the lives of youth in the Midwest.
Beauty and Percy.
Braille Findlay is 7 years old and is a first-year 4-H'er.
I've learned that you always need to be quiet around cows, and you can't make sudden movements.
Shanna Fleesick is 10 years old and has been in 4-H for 4 years.
You gotta make sure their halter broke, and then you know how to lead them, and you have to train their hair to get combed a specific way.
The 4-H Club in Canada is 102 years old.
4-H started in Roland, Manitoba many years ago. Some people gathered and they started thinking about how a group of young people, what they could do for the community, and using our head to think but our heart for loyalty, the health for the better living of our community, and our hands to larger service for our community. So that's our pledge.
Jackson Payne recently sold off his 1,300-pound steer at $5.75 a pound at the 4-H Expo, an investment in his future.
Well, if you want to make money, it's a good way because the cattle's rolling right now.
So what's a typical 4-H meeting like?
We start with the pledge, and then we start talking about new stuff that we need to do.
Shania Richards and her sister brought 8 head of cattle to this year's 4-H Expo.
It's meant a lot to me. Been in it for 12 years, so it's just something I do all the time, and our family shows cattle on the side, and yeah, it's just part of becomes part of who you are.
Here are some of the highlights of this year's journey.
All members need to do a speech on a chosen topic every year. Getting the job done is a key component.
It's the learning of starting a project, finishing a project, being caretakers of the land and of animals. Members can take many projects, from light horse to beef to grain to swine, goats, and then many things such as welding.
4-H kids are building for the future and their leadership stands out.
If you talk to any teachers who have 4-H kids in their classes, they always tell me, Alison, I can spot a 4-H'er anywhere.
Well, Canadian sheep may have a tough time going south of the border. The World Trade Organization has ruled that the Americans should dismantle country of origin labeling on meat products, but it seems the U.S. may want to keep the rules in place for sheep.
I'm a little bit befuddled that all of a sudden now it's an issue for the sheep growers in Canada. They still have access into the American market.
I find that a little surprising that, like I say, this exemption was brought to our attention by a single producer. In Ontario, how 11,000 producers would have missed any large or vocalized lobbying by the ASI, I don't know.
The American sheep industry is lobbying to keep sheep under the COOL legislation. The bill to repeal the contentious laws has gone through Congress and is before the U.S. Senate. Since 2003, with BSE and then the COOL legislation, the Canadian sheep industry estimates to have lost $300 million. Minister Ritz argues that for years, sheep producers said that COOL was not an issue and they had no money for a legal defense.
The Sheep Federation said, again, it's not an issue. I know they were asked by the cattlemen to put some money into the defense fund. I know they spent about $3 million on that, and they were told it wasn't an issue for them.
The minister was a little concerned that we hadn't been as involved in the lobby movement since 2008 as beef and pork. But we were able to prove to him. I was able to find letters of support back in the CSF at 2008, and I was able to find money that's still on the budget for advocacy that we had put aside to fight for COOL.
The Canadian Sheep Federation and as well Alberta Lamb on their websites are encouraging citizens to write their MPs to voice their concern. A 20-year sheep producer in Neilburg is also raising her voice.
Neither country would benefit from us not being able to import or export animals from the U.S. There's especially certain breeds, like, for example, Hampshires. There's not a huge amount of them in Canada.
If we allow the Americans to make an exemption to a WTO ruling, where does this lead future free trade negotiations for any commodity?
An Agriculture Year in Review continues after this break. Do stay with us.